What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about when did Britain and America stop hating each other. You know, to be honest, I've never really thought about this before, but now I'm really curious because at one point, America and Britain, we fought a whole war against each other, and now we're just like, whatever. It's in the past. Who cares? So, how long does it actually take to get over something like that? When did we become friendly again? Today, I want to find that out by watching this video. This is by History Matters. When did Britain and America stop hating each other? Let's take a look.
It would be an understatement to say that Britain and the USA's relationship got off to a rocky start. In 1812, Britain and America were at war, but just over a century later, they were fighting shoulder to shoulder in World War I.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, that is absolutely amazing to me. It's kind of interesting to be born, now I was born in the 90s, so it's like when I was born is like all of this was already done and over with. It's so fascinating to just be dropped onto Earth at a certain point in time where all this crazy stuff has already happened in the past. So yeah, anyway, I got a little carried away there, but it's like, yeah, we were fighting a war. Britain and America were literally killing each other. As dark and gruesome as that sounds, that's the reality. Then, 100 years later, we're fighting shoulder to shoulder with each other for the fate of the world. That's pretty amazing.
Which obviously raises the question, when did Britain and America become allies? There had to be a point where both went from actively disliking each other to working alongside each other.
Yeah.
Now, before continuing, it's important to note that even in the immediate aftermath of independence, America and Britain still had strong economic ties. This isn't to say that things were always great between the two, and there were some pretty major conflicts of interest in the years after the War of 1812 finished. The first, and perhaps the most obvious,
we had strong economic ties, like trade, after the American War for Independence against Great Britain. After that whole war, we, like the next day, after the war, the next day, we're like, oh, by the way, can you ship us some corn, please? We're hungry. How does that work? That's interesting to me.
obvious was the Monroe Doctrine, established in 1823. This was where the United States, by threat of military intervention, declared an end to any new European colonial adventures in the Americas. And for Britain, this was potentially a problem because it had economic interest in South America. In reality, though, it wasn't too much of a problem at all, because in 1833 it landed a force on the Falkland Islands and America did nothing. In 1842, the US did warn Britain against...
Okay, this is going very, very quickly, and it's talking about some things that I don't know anything about, but immediately following the war between America and Britain, Independence War, America started trying to put in place doctrines to stop Britain from doing trade or commerce with the Americas, and that didn't really work. Okay. America already from the jump, America was already trying to throw out these foreign policies and affect the rest of the world and say, hey, that's not what we want to do it this way. Okay, it started very, very early.
interference in Hawaii, which Britain did heed because America's international power was certainly growing. And it was this fact that America was a rapidly growing great power whose interests could no longer be ignored, which would dominate Anglo-American relations for the following century. So the next major event which could have changed the Anglo-American dynamic was the American Civil War, which broke out in 1861. Britain had already abolished slavery at this point, and so you would think that it would have preferred the Union over the Confederacy. But you'd be wrong. Now, Britain had no great affection for the Confederacy and its slaveholding practices. Its preferential treatment was purely economic, mostly due to cotton imports.
You know, I didn't actually even know that Britain took a side in the American Civil War. Of course, here in America, we learn about the American Civil War in pretty great length and detail, and yet at no point do I recall, maybe they said something about this, I don't recall talking about, Britain supporting a side of the American Civil War. Uh, Apparently, it just purely had to do with like trade and cotton sales or something.
Britain did consider formally recognising the Confederacy, and Anglo-American relations were severely harmed by what's called the Trent Affair. This was where the US government seized a ship with Confederate diplomats headed for Britain, which to Britain looked like the USA telling it who it could and could not speak to. In the end, cooler heads prevailed and Britain didn't get involved, although it did construct
Okay.
a very powerful warship, the CSS Alabama, for the Confederacy. And
Oh, so it was like Britain almost got involved, but did not. That's why, like, this isn't really talked about much, I think, in America, this little side point.
after the Civil War was over, Britain paid compensation to the United States. Thus, only 50 years away from World War I, Britain and America still didn't really care much for each other. So
Okay.
what changed this?
We didn't care much for each other 50 years following the war. We didn't care for each other, but it still sounds like there was a relationship going on that wasn't. There were some negative things in there, let's be honest. But there's also like we're clearly like talking and trading with each other. It's not like totally the cold shoulder, which is interesting. And probably it seems like it was all based upon what was mutually beneficial for each of our countries. It wasn't like we were slapping each other on the back like, "Oh, hey buddy, good to see you. How you doing?" Is just more like, "Okay, you want to sell me some of your cotton? Okay, fine. Fine."
Well, relations actually started to improve during Britain's border dispute with Venezuela in 1895. This
Okay.
developed into somewhat of a crisis, and the US intervened and arbitrated, siding mostly with Britain. For Britain, America
Oh. So there's a bunch of little things here that kind of were adding up. I don't know. This is kind of America extending the olive branch to Britain with this Venezuela conflict thing. America coming in, of course, sticking our nose in everything, but we're like, hey, we side with Britain here. And then Britain's like, oh, okay, America, you're not all bad.
had conducted itself in a well-mannered fashion and given Britain most of what it had wanted. And for America, by accepting American arbitration, Britain had yielded its right to influence South America. The other reason for Anglo-American rapprochement was simple: converging interests. America had emerged from its civil war a more centralised industrial power, and after
Right.
its defeat of Spain in 1898, it possessed a global empire too. And for Britain, things were rapidly changing as well. Its empire and global position was being threatened by Russia and the newly formed Germany. Britain had long practiced a policy of isolationism with respect to the European powers, but since they
Okay.
too were industrialising, this had the potential to threaten Britain's position. Thus,
Okay.
her most natural ally seemed to be the United States, since it was half a world away and had its own sphere of influence. Plus, they spoke the same language and shared many values.
You know, that can't be understated, can it? I think that little point right there, that America and Britain, we share a language and a fair amount of values, and some of the culture overlaps. There's a fair amount of similarities, and differences, but enough similarities that I feel like that actually is a big reason. Like right there, as funny as that is, that America and Britain became allies naturally, and also because it sounds like Britain was not at all worried about America wanting to invade Britain or take land from Britain or encroach on Britain or like some of the neighboring countries. Britain was not threatened by America, so it was just natural for a variety of reasons. I'm seeing how it was kind of natural for us to be like, okay, you know what? This could work out, friend.
It was at the turn of the 20th century under President Theodore Roosevelt that America and Britain really started to become friends,
Okay.
particularly with respect to one foreign policy stance. They didn't like Germany. This agreement allowed for Britain to move its fleet away from its Caribbean colonies back to Britain to defend itself from Germany, while security in the Caribbean would fall to the US. After the First World War broke out, Germany's actions, such as U-boat attacks on American shipping and the Zimmermann telegram, combined with the fact that if Britain and France lost the war, they wouldn't be able to pay their American loans back, assured US intervention on their side. And from that point on,
It's funny and also like not funny how so much of history boils down to money and like economic interests is the motivating factor for a lot of alliances and decision making. Interesting. I guess I'm not that surprised in a way, though.
Onwards, both the US and UK were largely in the same camps, barring a couple of mishaps here and there. I hope you enjoyed this episode and
Wow. That's it? Wow, that's it. Okay, this was very good. Again, this was by History Matters. Very good channel. Very succinct little summary here. Yeah, like I said, here in America, we don't really think, well, we never think about hating Britain. That's way too strong of a word. When we celebrate Independence Day for America, 4th of July, that's really more of a celebration of America and American culture. It's not, we don't really use that day. It's not an anti-British day at all, honestly. Yeah, I think most Americans have a very, very positive attitude towards Britain in general, and really like it and are interested in it. And at worst, Americans are indifferent to Britain if they don't know things, but generally have a positive attitude, I think. So, yeah, this was kind of a topic that I'd never really thought about before or heard about. But as soon as I saw it, it's like, yeah, that's right. We fought a war. I don't know. I feel like Americans and Brits from back in the day would be rolling in their graves like, oh, we fought a war to the death. But no, it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that time has gone on, and in this day and age, Americans like myself can honestly be like, yeah, I don't think anything negative about Britain or about like war and like, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting to see how we got from that war between America and Britain to today and how their relationship evolved. That was really interesting, actually. So anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. If you're British, it would be fascinating to hear your perspective on this as well, the British perspective on this. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain and learning about British culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.